everybody, and welcome back to Outside the Huddle with OT. I am your host, Dr. OT Porter, the NGFFL's Director of Communications, and I am finally back communicating directly with you, our NGFFL family, as we work to compete, connect, and unite. The podcast has been gone for a while due to all the other things going on in the world, but we are finally back and excited to be back. As you know, each episode of Outside the Huddle features the NGFFL's best and brightest, from city leaders to league members, Hall of Famers, and all the diverse individuals that make up and contribute to the success of the NGFFL. Tonight is a particularly exciting episode for two different reasons. Foremost, the interview format is going to be broken today. Normally, I am the one doing the interviewing. However, my co-host, is what I'll call him today, will also be asking me questions. So this will be a new format for Outside the Huddle, so I won't be the only person asking the questions, and the guest will not be the only person answering the questions. And our guest tonight, or today, whatever time you're listening to the podcast, is NGFFL cover boy and current Gay Bowl liaison, my amazing friend Shigeo. So without further ado, let me present for your listening pleasure, Shigeo. Hi, Shigeo, you are live.
Hi, how are you, OT?
Fantastic. It's so good to finally get you on the podcast. It's been really hard with your busy schedule. You're a hard man to pin down.
Well, it's a pleasure to make time here, and I'm pretty excited about this opportunity.
Good. I would just like to start at the beginning. I always think it's great to let people know a little bit about each of our guests. So give the listeners a bit of your NGFFL background.
So I am sort of started off as a player, just like as a player, just like everybody else. I was a player in New York, and my first gay bowl was 2013 in Phoenix. And that's kind of how I got really involved in the NGFFL. I was a player in New York for about 3 years before I was able to go to my first gay bowl. One, because I never knew that it existed, and I saw people kind of sort of talk about something and talk about getting excited around October, and then somehow we had a bye week magically in the middle of the season. I'm like, where did everybody go? And then sort of slowly but surely, I kind of found out that everybody went to this tournament, and I'm like, what? There's a big gay flag football national tournament, and I didn't even know about it. My first tournament, I went as a New York Warrior Silver team and in the B division in Phoenix, and that was the first year that I ended up winning the B division as a captain. So it was a really exciting first gay bowl for me. And then since then, I kind of got hooked up with that sort of like bitten by the gay bowl bug, as you call it, and quite honestly, there's no cure. So, I kind of kept getting deeper and deeper involved. And before I knew it, I got a chance to become on the NGFFL board. I was assistant commissioner of New York at the time. And this was an exciting opportunity for me. So I got involved and I said yes. And everything else has been the best time of my life. It's been really exciting. And then started off as a communication director. Now I'm Gay Bowl liaison, and I'm going on my 5th year on the NGFFL board, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh my God, I did not know that
6
you
years
held
now.
this position. Yeah. I never knew you held this position.
Yeah, I was very excited to start there and then go into the Gay Bowl liaison, which I've certainly enjoyed both experience pretty tremendously. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you obviously were great at both because you're still around. So.
Yeah. What was your background?
I started with Houston. In 2010, Phoenix was my first gay bowl. So I'd been sort of looking for a gay outlet because I had officially just come out of the closet the year before in December. And for a long time, like most people probably at some point in their life, I thought I was the only like out gay athlete. And then I found the Houston League and I joined, and like you said, I got bit by the gay bowl bug, and there is no cure for what gay bowl provides you. It was a fantastic time. I played with Houston for 4 years, and then I moved up to Detroit, and then I coached the Detroit team for 2 years, and then I moved back to Houston and became a referee, and then I unbecame a referee and played one last time last year in New York, and then I retired with quotation fingers. I'm hoping that my body doesn't tell me I should play again. But yeah, I've never served on the Houston board, but I always was a sort of idea man for them. I was always very close with the commissioners there, so I always had input in what was going on in Houston. As far as when they started to build the league, I was a very integral part of helping build the Houston League, and I was involved in when they held the Gay Bowl / Dust Bowl here in Houston, but not directly on the board. I never served directly on the board in Michigan, but I was also a part of their decision-making. I would very often sit in meetings with them and help them with ideas, and that's how I ended up becoming their coach for the 2 Gay Bowls that I helped coach. And then when I got back to Houston, that was when everything changed, and I ended up on the NGFFL board. So that's a little bit of my background. So
that's awesome. Well, and you've kind of been around a lot of places, and you know, I had a similar experience with being in New York and then Denver, and then now currently in Boston. In every single league that I've been involved in, it's just been absolute delight and amazing experience to be part of that community. But it's funny that 2013 was my first Gay Bowl, because I think 2013 was a very memorable Gay Bowl for you too, for other reasons.
It was. It was. It is the year that I proposed to my now husband, and we proposed at the closing ceremonies of the Gay Bowl, famously now, thanks to our NFL spot. Yeah, so it is one of my favorite Gay Bowls. Is that pretty much one of the most memorable? Yeah, is it one of your most memorable moments in a Gay Bowl history? It is. It really is. I don't know if it's the most memorable. I actually, like, the most memorable Gay Bowl moment for me was probably one that was even more surprising, right? Like, I knew I was getting engaged that weekend. I didn't know that I was getting double engaged that weekend. So that was sort of the surprise twist to that weekend. But I think my favorite, like the most surprising Gay Bowl memory that I have, and that's why it's probably one of my favorites, was the year that Thurman won the commissioner, because I remember being really excited for him, and we were talking before the vote came through, and I told him, like, I was like, Thurman, you're a shoo-in, like, you know you got it. And he was really nervous, and after they announced him, he did his speech, and he walked off the stage, and he came directly and gave me a big hug, and he goes, I'm going to need you on my board. And I was like, what? You know, like, I was so surprised, because it wasn't anything that I thought about, and I certainly didn't think I was on anyone's radar, especially Thurman's. Like, you know, we were friends and we were always kind to each other, but I didn't think I was on his radar to do anything. And so for that to happen, it meant such a great deal to me, and it made me feel even more included in a group that had made me feel included anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I wanna switch gears, right? Because one of the big things that we've been dealing with right now is the whole pandemic of COVID-19. And I know you, as the Gay Bowl liaison, are greatly affected by that. So what do you believe the lasting impact of COVID-19 will be on the LGBTQ plus sports world in a general sense?
So I think, though, like the lasting impact is going to be pretty profound because, it's going to forever change the way we look at the sport or maybe even events as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Because like these ideas of gathering, you realize how fragile they are, right? From a perspective of like LGBT people, health has been a forefront of that community, our community, since the 80s. And so for us to go through another pandemic in the way that we're going through right now, I think it's going to potentially shake us in a way that sort of makes us rethink everything, gatherings of how many, how do we format our contracts? How do we format our venues? How do we format certain things? And, if this is a long-term situation that we're dealing with, we can see a lasting impact that kind of sort of spans over a decade in some ways, shape or another. But certainly it's going to make us stronger. It's going to make us more efficient. It's going to have to make us think outside of the box and make us be more creative around the ways that we respond to certain things. I mean, how do you do social distancing with sports, right? Especially in flag football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if you're doing tennis or something like that, but, flag football, it's going to change the way that we look at things. Hopefully, we have a vaccine or something like that changes and we go back to quote unquote normal, but it's certainly going to change the way and it's going to have a lasting impact. People are going to start to sort of get worried every time there's going to be people in large gatherings and everything like that. I would love for it to get back to normal, but it's going to take us a little while.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Excuse me.
Yeah. What do you? Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
What do you think the most fundamental thing is that we should be worried about? Speaking of COVID-19, like, what do we most sort of focus our energy around right now? Do you think?
For me, I believe the most fundamental thing is connectedness, right? Just remaining apart but together, right? Like finding ways, being creative about connecting with other people. And there are so many outlets digitally, but it also is important. I've seen, Michael Tanner, for instance, in Atlanta. His birthday was recently. And he just stood outside of his house, and some of the players drove by and said hello, but kept their distance. You want to touch people, you want to hug, you want to fellowship in that way, but there are really dynamic ways to stay connected with people, but still be smart and be safe. And so for me, I think that's at the epicenter of dealing with this crisis and this pandemic is just finding creative ways to stay connected with other people so that you don't feel so isolated, you don't feel so alone, you don't feel socially distant, right? You can find ways around that.
I'm going to break the mold here. Do you mind if I ask another follow-up question here?
Go for it.
Is it so? Like when people are feeling so socially distanced and potentially feeling alone, before kind of talking about like further stuff, is it okay to feel sad or anxious during this time? I mean, because I think that's a natural feeling, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. I will preface this with a reminder that while I am a psychologist and a therapist, this is in no way professional advice, but it is very important to pay attention to your feelings and to validate them and acknowledge them. If you're sad, that's okay. If you're having anxiety around it, that's also okay. You don't have to surrender to it, though. it's important to acknowledge that it is happening. It's important to allow yourself to feel sad, to allow yourself to feel anxious. There is a sort of grieving process that is going on. We are losing multiple things. There are sports venues. There are opportunities to fellowship. There are, the laughs and the hugs and all of those different things that are part of the sports community where you're losing that. So there's a grieving process that comes along with that. And along with that grieving process often is sadness or even maybe a mild depression or anxiety. But you don't have to surrender to that. Like, remember the things that created that safe haven for you, right? Remember that the people who you were reaching out to, they're still available to you, just not in the same way. So take a moment when you're feeling sad, acknowledge that, but then reach out to one of those people who you miss. You yourself posted on Facebook the other day that you're just going to start reaching out to one or two people a day. I think it was 10. I think you got up to 10.
Yeah, it was 10.
But, that's a great way to connect with other people. Do something that reminds you of what was important about the sport without the sport. Because most of us who are playing sports, we play because we enjoy the sport, but we come back because we love the people. And the love of the people that you meet, the bonds that you're making, that's, for me, what's most important. I have a question for you. So what lessons do you believe our LGBTQ plus athletes can learn from COVID-19?
I think so, as sports sort of takes a hiatus or even canceled and everything like that, I think it sort of gives us a pause to what's really important, right? Because I think, lessons, it's the lessons that relationships matter and connections make a difference, right? United, we are together, and just because sports is canceled doesn't make us less united. I think it's a huge lesson for us to think about it from an element that it doesn't have to take a football tournament to bring us together, right? It could bring us together in a different way. It's the Zoom game nights or a text message or a Facebook message or just feeling connected through conversations or a podcast like this or music. It gives us an opportunity to connect through people in different ways. And I think we're learning new ways to connect in that process and feeling okay to do that. I mean, maybe it's slightly old-fashioned, but, picking up the phone and calling somebody or FaceTiming somebody is somehow suddenly like more frequent, right? So I think we're learning that social distancing kind of means that we need to use our tools to try to connect again in those social distancing moments, because what we don't want to do is isolate ourselves, kind of like what you were talking about earlier around anxiety or sadness, to the point where we're really getting to the point where we're socially distancing ourselves to the point of, anonymity or privacy in some ways. And we really don't want to get to the point where we're lost or we're stuck. We still want to keep ourselves connected. So I think it's giving us a lesson that, sports can be canceled, but relationships don't need to be canceled,
I love that message. I have a follow-up question because it's like you've already spoken to it, but is there a way that you believe this can be leveraged as a positive for the LGBTQ community?
I think it could make us stronger, right? Like it shows the desire that something like this is, how important something like this is. When we made the sort of really difficult decision to cancel Gable, I mean, I can't tell you the number of text messages and Facebook messages and email messages that I got that, one, sort of had a little bit of anger or frustration associated, saying, I can't believe you're doing this, I'm devastated. And then there was a lot of group of people that were texting me saying, you know, I know this was a really difficult decision, but thank you so much, because I know that shows that your care. I know it's not an easy decision, but it showed the element that so many people rely on experiences like this. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, I don't necessarily think that canceling a tournament is any way beneficial or we're going to turn it into some kind of advantage in some ways, but it is showing that these events and canceling of events is showing a very passionate community or involved community. And I think it's giving us an opportunity to refocus on what's most important about why we do what we do. And so it's giving me that sort of opportunity to think, okay, well, there's clearly some appetite or thirst for involvement or connection. So maybe we need to take that. Like, for example, if we would have canceled Gable and there was not a single peep, I'm like, okay, no big deal. You know, I think that's when we would really have to worry about, like, really, are we doing the right thing? Like, are we canceling something and nobody cares about? Like, there's a tree fall in the woods and nobody was there to hear it, so it didn't matter, you know. You know, so I think in many ways it's giving us an opportunity to refocus and kind of channel that energy and turn it into something extraordinarily positive and powerful. And so it kind of gives me some motivation to sort of say, well, now like Gable, it's not easy, but Gable was kind of easy to put on, right? I mean, because you get a flag football tournament, and behind the scenes, yes, it's a lot of work, but it's kind of easy, right? It's a flag football tournament, and we kind of do a good job. But you know, now I feel like the hard work is going to start. That says, well, how do you create community without the one thing that we normally use or leverage to do it? And it's going to make us think smarter and harder, and being able to sort of change the conversation around, like, really, what does involvement without a tournament look like? And I think long-term wise, that, you know, we're going to have that in our repertoire and our tool belt moving forward. So it's going to be a really exciting opportunity for us.
Yeah, those are fantastic points. You went way deeper than I expected, in a good way.
Well, that's what I do, right? Like you like if anybody knows me, you know that, like, I take it to the next level all the time, and like I try to work so hard on just about everything. So when you pose a question like that, I'm going to be like, yes, there's an opportunity for us here.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I love about chatting with you.
Yeah.
Which is why this dialogue works.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that our community is impacted? Like, I know it's impacted because COVID-19, but do you think it's evolving into something different then?
I hope so, because there is such an interesting dynamic in the, and I'm using quotation fingers again, community of the LGBTQ plus, right? Even the acronym of LGBTQ plus, it has become such a fiercely debated topic. And then you look at the division in each category, right? I'm a male, and so being gay, I could be a jock or a bear or an otter or a twink, and there are all these weird divisions. And what I really hope comes from this is a real sense of LGBTQ plus community, where people stop living by their labels and start living as a real community that helps each other raise the next. Because ultimately, all of our rights are in jeopardy. It doesn't matter if you're a twink or bear. It doesn't matter if you're black or Asian. It doesn't matter if you're femme or masculine jock. None of that matters, because at the end of the day, if you fall under LGBTQ, your rights are in jeopardy and your liberties are in jeopardy, because there are people who are actively fighting against you. So why continue to fight against ourselves? Right. And so for me, I just hope what happens is a true sense of community, because I look around and I see flashes. That's the word I want to say. I was going to say glimpses, but it's flashes of it. I see people coming together. I see people not caring about things that aren't important. And I hope that continues I hope that becomes the new normal. Instead of things going back to normal, I hope it becomes the new normal, is that we continue to care about each other and really be a community in the way that I've seen in the past 2 months. I think that's important.
That's awesome.
So when you think about just people in general, if there's a listener somewhere struggling to deal with the lack of social presence, specifically LGBTQ athletes or the athletics brought to that person's life, what would you want that person to hear or know at this time?
Well, like earlier you talked about being sad and anxious and all those other kind of things, and I think that's okay to feel that way, right? But most part, like, don't give up hope, I think we're going to be back, and we're going to be stronger. And there is, we're going to get through this. And so right now it's a pause, right? It's like that moment where you're watching a movie and you have to, like, you're so hungry you have to get up and go make dinner, and you push pause on that movie just to kind of keep it where it is, and so you can do something else for a little while, right? It's the same concept here. LGBT sports is just on a little pause, but that doesn't mean that the relationships, earlier I said this too, but the relationships don't need to be canceled, or the relationships don't need to be paused, right? So in this meantime, like, focus on the friendships, focus on the, your previous captains or your teammates, and to check in on them to say, hey, how you doing? And I think it's important to build those connections now, in a way that, that works for you, that works for the person that's listening out there, because those connections are going to look different from individuals, right? Some people are going to feel more comfortable picking up the phone, but some people are going to be more comfortable in, sending a pigeon to somebody, a message, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Whatever those moments are, I think people just need to keep on hoping and not giving up that this is going to come back and we're going to be stronger than ever. But, look towards the future, and, competitive outlets like, that's where Zoom game nights or those kind of, maybe you kind of have to fire up those competitive natures, but maybe it's okay to put the competition on pause for a second, and let's focus on unity. And, not that competition is a total, like, divider, but, we don't have to have a winner and a loser on this one, like, we can all be winners and we can all be heroes in this process. So, I would say let's all focus on what's good about each other right now, kind of move forward, and then, hope that the people that are working behind the scenes, like, the NGFFL board or all the LGBTQ sports boards across the country and the nation. I've been in touch with other commissioners from different leagues, from dodgeball to softball to volleyball, and they're all working so hard on rebuilding their communities and getting ready for their 2022 or 2020 late season tournaments. And so know that we're all working, right? We're all behind the scenes working to try to make sure that this maybe 2020 there was a pause, but we're definitely moving forward, and we're going to bring it back even better than where it used to be. So we have that responsibility. So we're going to keep working for that.
I believe that, and I know because I'm working with you. So that is definitely the goal.
Our every other day conversations, it feels like, right?
Yeah, we do talk a lot, but that's so good. You're my fave. I have one other question for you before we get ready to start wrapping up. When you think about the totality of COVID, like, what has been the most impactful experience you've had as a result of COVID and the effect on the LGBTQ plus, like, sports community in general?
So that's a really interesting question. It took me a second to realize this, but I realized I don't know very much about people outside of the flag football world, right? And to me, it was extraordinarily powerful and profound to remember that we're all volunteers. Flag football is not our first job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to remember that every person has a story, right? Whether they're working as a nurse and we were able to focus on some of those things in the 2-minute drills and all those other kind of things. But those people that were working in a restaurant and they lost their jobs, or people that are working in the travel industry and they're struggling and they're feeling really anxious right now, or people that are in frontline, nurses, teachers, it makes me realize the profound impact of life that is going through this, right? And not just LGBT sports. And, we come together, see each other once or twice a year through sports. And in those 3 or 4 days, we think about them as athletes, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do. But then this COVID-19 has certainly made me see athletes as people. I know it's fundamental and it's so basic to think that way, but caring for your neighbor or caring for your teammates kind of reintroduced a very different way of thinking for me. And so it's been extraordinarily impactful for me to hear people's stories and checking in with people and understanding what they're going through. And, not just like, how are you doing with your football team, but how are you? How are you doing? Are you healthy? Are you safe? Are you feeling, happy? Are you taking care of yourself? Those kind of conversations are really important right now. And it's making me focus on the individual and the person and the stories that people tell, not just about the sports. So it's given me that sort of what I call a Google Maps moment where you're kind of like zoomed into a house and then you kind of zoom out a little bit and you can see a neighborhood and then you zoom out even more and you can see kind of county. And it's giving me that sort of like bigger perspective of people's stories and lives and everything like that. And it kind of gave me an opportunity to refocus and say, I better really stop and think. Like, I know where they're from. I know maybe their partner's name, but like, I don't know what they do, or I don't know, is their family safe? Maybe I don't know enough about those kind of things. It's giving me a pause to think. Like, let me reach out to some people to get to know what they're going through a little bit more, because right now those our community matters, and our people are our community.
That's fantastic. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think the listeners need to hear?
Well, I mean, no, not really. I mean, I think it's been an honor and privilege and to help people in this process. I mean, it's been really cool for me to be in the position that I am. It's like interesting, right? What does a gay bowl liaison do when there's no gay bowl? So it's been really
right.
interesting to refocus my energy on a lot of other things. And it's been really, I feel like it's not just a privilege that I have. Now I feel like I have a responsibility to tell people stories. And so now I'm getting to the point where I kind of feel like it's, now that Gay Bowl is canceled, I feel like I have a responsibility or an actual sort of task to say, well, I need to somehow fill the void of community building, of connections, and unification of our league through a different venue. So, thanks for giving me the opportunity to think harder and work harder and maybe smarter in this process, because I've been really fortunate to be in this position, and I'm pretty excited about the opportunity moving forward in some ways. Not excited about the COVID-19 and everything like that at all. But
right.
I think it's going to make us much stronger as a league in many ways.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But thank you, Shigeo, for this whole idea, this whole conversation. I think this was a very interesting new dynamic to add to the Outside the Huddle podcast. And I'm hoping that this tradition carries on and that there are more conversations like this happening outside of the league, outside of this moment, in the league with all people, because I think these sort of conversations are really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, thank you. Thank you again, Shigeo, and thank all of you for joining us here on Outside the Huddle. Remember that each episode is made available through the NGFFL monthly newsletter, the 2-Minute Drill. It is also on our YouTube channel, and it is also now available on iTunes for download. So hope you enjoyed the conversation and that you gleaned some incredible elements from it. When you listen to the podcast, if you really like it, be sure to hashtag us, hashtag NGFFL. If you comment on Facebook or YouTube, hashtag NGFFL. And until the next time we meet, be kind to yourself and be kind to all the others you meet be kind to all the others you encounter as you compete, connect, and unite. And have a wonderful rest of your day.